the opportunity to buy a new stock at insider prices just as it goes on the market. They can be incredibly lucrative and hard to get.
If you were a senator, Steve, and I gave you $10,000 cash, one or both of us is probably going to go to jail. But if I'm a corporate executive and you're a senator and I give you IPO shares in stock, and over the course of one day that stock nets you $100,000, that's completely legal.
And former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her husband had participated in at least 8 IPOs. One of those came in 2008 from Visa, just as a troublesome piece of legislation that would have hurt credit card companies began making its way through the House. Undisturbed by a potential conflict of interest, the Pelosis purchased 5,000 shares of Visa at the initial price of $44. 2 days later, it was trading at $64. The credit card legislation never made it to the floor of the House. Congresswoman Pelosi also declined our request for an interview, but agreed to call on us if we attended a news conference. Madam Leader, I wanted to ask you why you and your husband, back in March of 2008, accepted and participated in a very large IPO deal from Visa. At a time there was major legislation affecting the credit card companies making its way through the House. And did you consider that to be a conflict of interest?
I don't know what your point is of your question. Is there some point that you want to make with that?
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think it's all right for a speaker to accept a very preferential, favorable stock deal?
Well, we didn't.
You participated in the IPO.
Well, I have many
and at the time you were Speaker of the House. You don't think it was a conflict of interest or had the appearance of a conflict of interest?
It only has the appearance if you decide that you're going to have elaborate on a false premise. But it's not true, and that's that.
I don't understand what part's not true.
Yes, sir. That I would act upon an investment. Yes,
Congresswoman Pelosi pointed out that the tough credit card legislation eventually passed, but it was 2 years later and was initiated in the Senate.
I will hold my record in terms of fighting the credit card companies as a Speaker of the House or as a member of Congress up against anyone's.
Corporate executives, members of the executive branch, and all federal judges are subject to strict conflict of interest rules, but not the people who write the laws.
If you are a member of Congress and you sit on the Defense Committee, you are free to trade defense stock as much as you want to. If you're on the Senate Banking Committee, you can trade bank stock as much as you want, and that regularly goes on in all these committees.
There should only be one thing in your mind when you're drafting legislation. Is this good for the United States of America? That's it. If you're starting to say to yourself, how's this going to affect my investments? You've got a mixed agenda and a mixed purpose for being there. And
Brian Baird is a former congressman from Washington State who served 6 terms in the House before retiring last year. He spent half of those 12 years trying to get his colleagues to prohibit insider trading in Congress and establish some rules governing conflicts of interest.
One line in a bill in Congress can be worth millions and millions of dollars. I mean, there was one night we had a late night caucus, and you could kind of tell how a vote was going to go the next day. And I literally walked home and I thought, man, if you went online and made some significant trades, you could make a lot of money on this. You could just see it. You could see the potential here.
So in 2004, Baird and Congresswoman Louise Slaughter introduced the Stock Act, which would make it illegal for members of Congress to trade stocks on non-public information and require them to report their stock trades every 90 days instead of once a year. How far did you get with this?
We didn't get anywhere. Just flat died. Went nowhere.
How many co-sponsors did you get?
I think we got 6.
6 doesn't sound like a very big amount.
It's not, Steve. You could have National Cherry Pie Week and get 100 co-sponsors. I mean,
when Baird finally managed to get a congressional hearing on the Stock Act, almost no one showed up. It's reintroduced every session, but is buried so deep in the Capitol, we had trouble finding congressmen who had ever heard of it. Have you ever heard of the Stock Act?
The what?
The Stock Act. Do you know anything about it?
No.
Congressman? Congressman?
I haven't heard about that one yet.
Have you ever heard of something called the Stock Act?
No.
I've heard about it, but not. I can't say it's an issue I spend a lot of time on, though.
I would have no problem with that.
Okay.
But then again, I am a big fan of, instant disclosure on almost everything.
They're looking for co-sponsors.
and yet I've never heard of it.
When you have a bill like this that makes so much sense, and you can't get the co-sponsorships, you can't get the leadership to move it, it gets tremendously frustrating. Set aside that it's the right thing to do, it's good politics. People want their Congress to function well. It still baffles me.
But what baffles Baird even more is that the situation has gotten worse. In the past few years, a whole new totally unregulated $100 million industry has grown up in Washington called political intelligence. It employs former congressmen and former staffers to scour the halls of the Capitol, gathering valuable non-public information, then selling it to hedge funds and traders on Wall Street who can trade on it.
Now, if you're a political intel guy and you get that information long before it's public, long before somebody wakes up the next morning and reads or watches the television or whatever, you've got it. And you can make real-time trades before anybody else.
Baird says it's taken what would be a criminal enterprise anyplace else in the country and turned it into a profitable business model.
The town is all about people saying, what do you know that I don't know? And this is the currency of Washington, D.C. And it's that kind of informational currency that translates into real currency. Maybe it's over drinks. Maybe somebody picks up a phone and says, you know, just to let you know, it's in the bill. Trades happen. Can't trace them. If you can trace them, it's not illegal. It's a pretty great system. You feel like an idiot to not take advantage of it.